Wow,
That's some
Da-
beautiful music.
David, you look a lot different in that video than you do in real life. I mean, we wouldn't know because your video is not on, but
Well, when I'm teaching and up at the chalkboard, my face changes. Like I put on a little bit of a different persona.
okay. All right. Well, I'd like to welcome everyone to this week's Chill with Jim, and thank you all for joining us on this episode. And as you know, it's always business up top and new pajama pants on the bottom. Oh, there we go. New pajamas on the
Okay,
bottom.
it's good. For a minute there, I thought you didn't have any legs.
I guess they're camouflaged. Yes, welcome to Chill with Jim. I am your host, Jim McCarthy, and I am the client advocate for Strix, Louisiana. My job is to make sure that our clients are set up with the best equipment, the best software, and the best IT solutions to help their businesses run at optimal efficiency. We also have David DeArmond with us.
Hey, David DeArmond, owner of Strix LA, and I appreciate you being here today and talking about the ever exciting topic of CMMC.
All right. Well, just I was waiting for the applause to come in. I heard it. It's just probably my headphones are noise canceling, so
Yeah, noise
everybody out
cancel.
there didn't hear it. But so just a little bit before we start about Strix, Louisiana, we believe there's always a better, simpler, more secure way to do just about everything in this world. So what that means is we are constantly searching and adapting our processes to make sure that we do indeed have the best solution in place. We believe that part of this responsibility is to help educate our clients as well as others on how to best use their current resources. We want to bring some awareness to some of the security risks that are going on right now, and then just talk about some of the general IT trends that are happening in the world today. And so today we're actually going to be touching on the security side of things, the cybersecurity side of things. So this week we're going to be talking about E equals MC squared. Wait. That's not right. It's CMMC. Okay, that's what we're talking about. David, what does this acronym stand for on the spot? Go.
Oh, you see, you put me on the spot. It's crazy, Mike. No, I don't know, Jim. I don't know, Jim.
All right, well, it's cyber security maturity model certification, CMMC. So, what does that mean? Well, we always like to start out with the why at the Chill with Jim, but for this topic, we're actually going to go ahead and make sure that we understand somewhat of what the CMMC stands for and what it is. Uh, so for starters, the Department of Defense, the DoD, defines the cybersecurity maturity model certification as a unified standard for the implementation of cybersecurity across the defense industrial base. The CMMC is a framework that includes a comprehensive and scalable certification to verify different levels of cybersecurity maturity. Now, the CMMC is designed to provide increased assurance that the DoD that contracts out their work, those contractors, to make sure that they're adequately protecting sensitive data, unclassified and classified information through their multi-tiered supply chain. So that is a very, very fancy
Very, very,
definition.
very simple.
Yes.
Yeah.
But we did talk about the multi-tiered supply chain. And David, we've talked about this before in Chill with Jim, but can you break down a little bit about what they mean with this multi-tiered supply chain?
Yeah. Well, when the Department of Defense reaches out to civilian contractors or anyone that's going to do work for them, they're creating a supply chain. So as those businesses do work, they are doing that work for the Department of Defense, and they are creating something for the Department of Defense. And so they are supplying something to the Department of Defense. Therefore, they are part of the supply chain. So whatever it is that the Department of Defense is asking of the civilian contractors, they become a piece of that supply chain. And when you're talking about these contractors with DoD, a lot of times those supply chains get pretty long, because you have prime contractors, and then you have large contractors and small contractors, and it goes down level by level. What if that small company right at the end is not protecting their systems, and the next person builds on that piece of technology, and then the next person, and then the Department of Defense implements it? Well, way down here at the beginning of the supply chain, a vulnerability was introduced, and now the Department of Defense is vulnerable, and they don't want to be in that situation.
Yeah, great explanation. And so this certification, the CMMC, is actually based off of another couple of certifications, NIST 800. I'm not going to do all the numbers and letters, and DFARS, which was the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement. These regulations were previously and are still in place for data security. But anyone out there who answers this question correctly gets the Chill with Jim Participant of the Day Award. Were these past two regulations a requirement that was actually verified by the DoD? Anybody out there? And
Brad,
looks,
it may be up to you. I'm only
well,
seeing. Well,
and
we
then
do have people on Facebook.
I was
So
waiting for them to come on in.
yeah.
Looks like Brad.
So if it is in the contract, then it's contractually obligated. So yes.
Okay. All right. So if it was not in the contract, and what happened with most of these regulations is they were kind of left out there as a self-governed guideline. So
Yeah, I
you were
think
supposed to have this in place. Go ahead.
I think that's the important where you threw that word verified in there. And these things, they've been required for a long time. They have not been so well verified. And that's been the kicker. And that's what, to me, and Brad, interject if you'd like, but to me, that's what is really driving this whole CMMC thing is, it's got to get verified, because there were too many people saying, yeah, we're doing that. Yeah, sure. And they weren't really doing it.
They would also, so with DFARS, which the actual clause is 7012, that states the full NIST 800 series. And what that had allowed for was to have a plan of action and milestones. And so you could say, yeah, we're compliant and we plan to be compliant this date. No one's checking that. And so you could just say, yeah, we'll get to that at some point in time, and just keep pushing that date back. According to the regulation, you fall within it, you're compliant. And, everyone would just throw the hard stuff into what's called the POAM, which is that document. And if they ever got audited, they'd be good. And that's why the CMMC was created, is to get away from self-attestation, and hey, we really need to focus on this, and so this is the only way to do it.
Great point. Yes, that's where it's been in the past. Quite a bit of the, hey, we're doing it. You don't really need to provide a lot of proof, or there's a lot of gray area to the proof you do need to supply or support. The CMMC is coming in. They're going to be auditing, and they're going to need that proof of completion depending on which level you are at. So that's where the big difference is here, is that with this certification, they're saying that it is going to be enforced quite a bit more than what it had in the past. And so you may be asking yourself, well, what does this mean for my business or for the other medium, small, large businesses out there. Well, basically, if you're doing any type of work for the DoD, or if you plan on doing any work in the future, this could be mowing the grass to doing environmental consulting, similar to QRI. You will most likely need to do some digital hygiene, and you will have to work towards the certification because this will be a requirement by the end of 2021 or possibly sooner. I know they were pushing to get it out last year, and it has been moved to the end of this year, so that date may vary, but basically it's in effect. It's I don't know how to say that. Is it in it's in effect, but they're doing a phased in approach. So they're slow to really get onto the audits and all of that. Is that correct? A correct way of saying it, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, they're not actually doing audits yet, and they're still making some minor changes, I guess you would say, to the model. They they have to decide exactly how they're going to audit, how they're going to conduct these audits, and they're that's a cooperative effort between between the civilian world and the military world. So they're still kind of working some things out, and every time you think, okay, well they're done, something else pops up, and they need to discuss it further.
All right. Yeah, much better. So that's kind of what it is briefly, and then the why behind it. So if you work for the DoD in any capacity, you're probably going to have some information about the government or that government agency that could be exploited by a vulnerability, and then could eventually go up that supply chain like David talked about and create a defense or a security problem for the Department of Defense. So that's why the reason, if you look at the increased security that they're doing for this certification, it's pretty easy to understand the why, because if you've noticed lately, the massive amount of increase in cybercrime and digital attacks. I know Louisiana got hit last year big on the state level, where their machines were shut down for almost a full week due to some criminal activities. Verizon, last year, Verizon 2020 data breach report indicates that the small businesses out there actually accounted for 58% of those breaches that were reported. So that's what the government is starting to really notice and trying to put these regulations in place, is because all through that supply chain, you have that one person who's not compliant, and it can go all the way up to the top. They're really doing what's like the adage that we've heard a few times on here, that it's not if, but when an attempt on your data is going to happen. And David looked like he was going to say something,
Yeah.
so I stopped, but I didn't.
Yeah, well, yeah, I was going to say something. It's and I think that's why it's so important to the DoD, because they know, number one, if you're a contractor with the DoD, you've become a high value target now. It's already a situation for any small business, any business at all. It's not if, it's when. Now, when you become a high value target, all of a sudden the frequency of attack is going to increase, and the complexity, the how targeted it's going to be, is probably going to increase as well. So that's where you see that what's required in CMMC and what's in NIST and DFARS, those things go beyond what perhaps a typical small business would do. And I'm thinking, you may get into this, but that's probably what is a bit intimidating to people when they start thinking about implementing all of this as a small business. It's too big, it's too expensive, and it's it seems like a lot, but it's not. It's really not as difficult as it may look at first glance.
Yep. Yeah, that's right. So we are going to break things down. My background, we're going to hope to get you guys to the certified level that you want through the help of our information today. So hopefully you'll be celebrating with some balloons, that nice little certification mark there.
I think that's the real certification mark, right? The one that they give you.
Federally stamped, yes. Brad, you had something there?
No, I can't remember what I was going to say.
No
your
worries.
balloons threw me off.
They're very shiny and gold, Strix colors. So no worries, no worries. What I'd like to just touch on, so if the Department of Defense, which includes the Army, Navy, Air Force, a bunch of other entities, relies on over 300,000 different companies and subcontractors to maintain their operations.
That's
So
a big
when I
supply
first,
chain.
it's a big supply chain. And when I first
Yeah.
thought about this, I really thought they did almost everything in-house, but they don't. And so I'm going to help paint this picture with a little example here. So imagine the DoD wants to start training Air Force pilots through the use of virtual reality. Now, the Air Force, they have the pilots, they have all the specifications of what their aircrafts do, and they have all this training material that they usually go through, but they don't have the virtual reality technology. They don't have the experience or the expertise. So the Air Force, what they do is they find and contract a non-government company with the years of experience that specializes in virtual reality, like our friends over at King Crow Studios. And the Air Force is going to employ them to help them get what they're looking to do done. Now, if the Air Force wanted to do this internally, they would probably have to hire a bunch of new people and possibly create a whole new VR, virtual reality department. And now we all kind of know how fast our government is at accomplishing things. So, especially on an administrative level. So, it would probably take 6 months to get the approval to open the department, and then maybe another 5 months to find, accredit, and hire the staff that's needed. So instead, what the Air Force is doing is they're going out, they're finding these subcontractors, they're finding the specialists which they need help with, and they're employing them to help. And so that kind of helped me at least understand that, wow, they're really subbing out quite a bit of what they do. And the CMMC is a way for them to help verify that any of those people coming on board are at least doing the minimum that is required for their level of involvement. And so we'll go ahead and talk about some of the different levels here. But before we kick off into that, I'd like to go over some of the terminology so we can get that under wraps until before we get there, so there's a little better understanding. The first term we're going to hear is FCI, which stands for Federal Contact Information. Now, this is information that's not intended for public release. It is generally going to be provided or generated for the government under a contract. That contract is to develop or deliver a product or service to the government. So FCI is kind of the lowest level of security that they're worried about there. The FCI, the contact information, it's not super super
Protected.
protected, sensitive. Thank you. Super sensitive. But they still, if you're touching it, if you have it, they still want some level of protection in place. Now, the second one you're going to hear quite a bit of is the CUI. Now, this stands for Controlled Unclassified Information. So whenever the DoD provides information to the contractors, it needs to identify whether any of that information is an actual CUI, and it needs to mark such documents, material, or media as a CUI. That's a very important term when it comes to your levels of CMMC. Now, one thing to note here is if you are a non-DoD entity, you can actually generate new information that then becomes a CUI. So if that's the case, you really need to keep up good contact with the DoD, with whatever contract you have. You need to submit that information for approval and make sure it's documented. The CUIs really, they must be protected in a very specific manner, and we'll go into that now. So just a few examples of a CUI or CUI documents would include research data, engineering drawings. It could be specifications, manuals, technical reports, or even the item identifier of maybe some kind of part you get or whatever they're handing to you. It also includes computer software, executable code, and source data. And so those are some of the examples of what they're looking to really get a handle on that's not been tracked so well lately. So let's go ahead and dive right in to what the CMMC lays out as some of their guidelines. So they do have what they call domains, and domains are, there's 17 of these groups of basically capabilities or domains. I'll go ahead and share my screen with everyone so we can take a look at that. And David, verify that you see the domains up there for me. All right, so most companies that are working with the DoD are gonna have to demonstrate and achieve certain parts of these domains to fall within their security level. And so as you see over here, they have access control, incident reporting, risk management, asset management. They have a bunch of these categories, which the information, the work that you're doing for the Department of Defense is going to probably fall into one of these categories. You're going to have to go ahead and make sure that you are representing each one of these correctly in your security practices. So you
Yeah,
want to,
these are just good, good, I guess, overall aspects of a strong cybersecurity stance. So, do you have access control? Are you able to report an incident? What is your personal security? All of these things. Again, none of this stuff is new. It's all been around for years, and people who have been involved in cybersecurity, they've been doing this a long time.
yeah. So that's what they're basing a lot of these levels off of. And the more that you can demonstrate that the more categories you can demonstrate you're actually hitting, you're achieving, really the higher up of each level you can go. So there are 5 different levels I'll go ahead and show here for the CMMC. And from the bottom, you can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's basically the basic hygiene is level 1, intermediate cyber hygiene 2, good cyber hygiene 3. Got real creative with the names here. Number 4, you're proactive, and number 5, advanced progressive. So
yeah, I really like the part of the CMMC is your maturity. It's your cyber maturity level, right? And I think this is a good explanation of are you level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5? How mature are you in your cybersecurity stance? So that's one of those words that's just always kind of stuck with me is your maturity level. How mature are you?
And to note on that, the maturity level is actually, it builds upon each other. So you can't just be a number 3 without having 2 and 1 under your belt. So as you mature through this, you reach the next level, but you do have to hit each of the requirements of the subcategories there. So we'll look at number 1, the level 1, which is the basic cyber hygiene. This first level includes just really the basics that are included for making sure that your cybersecurity is up to date with what the DoD needs. These organizations need to be able to perform the required levels and practices, or the required practices at this level, and at least in an ad hoc manner, show and prove that they can. The difference here, though, is with number one, you don't need to really keep any documentation on it. And this is one of those where they don't necessarily audit you. It's more of a, like we talked about before, kind of a self-governing. Oh yeah, we're level number one. Level one focuses more on the FCIs that we talked about earlier, the federal contact information, and it consists only of the practices that correspond to safeguarding those FCIs.
Yeah. Yeah, and my understanding of the contracts that you get with DoD, within the contract, it's going to specify what maturity level you need to be in order to qualify for the contract. Brad, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, the maturity level will be stated in the RFP. So before you even get a contract. And you only have to have the certification at time of award. So you can plan on having it, but they will not award it to you until you have that level.
Right. Okay. So we're seeing a lot of companies right now preparing for this certification because they know it's only a matter of time until the government pulls the trigger on this, really enforcing it. And so a lot of them are in the building stages of getting to the level they need to be, making sure they hit all the requirements there. So let's go ahead, talk about level number 2, the intermediate stage. At this level, an organization is expected to establish and document standard operating procedures, policies, and a strategic plan to help guide the implementation of this cybersecurity program. So practices at this level must be documented, but level 2 really serves as mostly a transitional stage from level 1 to level 3. It's setting you up for the big boy, which is level 3. The level 3 is really where it gets pretty strict with what you need to do. And that's where a lot of these DoD contractors, if they're at level 3, they're going to have a decent amount of work to do to get to that level. And again, all of these are based off of the NIST 800, the DFARS. A lot of these expectations are already out there. It's just they need to be in place. So when you're looking at level 3, and like I said, this is really where it separates sensitive from not so sensitive information. That's where an organization will have to demonstrate good cyber hygiene and effectively and show that they effectively implemented the controls to meet this requirement. So this is where the CUI comes in. And David, what does that CUI stand for one more time?
Well, the correct pronunciation, as Brad put there on Facebook, is actually CUI. CUI.
Okay.
Yeah. But it stands
I don't
for
want to say CUI because it sounds so much like GUI.
Yeah, well, they're
like
spelled very similar, GUI, and yeah, CUI. Yeah, it's controlled unclassified information. So unclassified, but it is controlled.
Thank you. Thank you. So at this level, the DoD, whoever you're working with, is going to say, hey, we have these CUIs for you, these CUIs for you, or perhaps you're going to be generating CUIs, CUIs while you're working with us. So we need you to achieve level 3. Mm-hmm. If you are working with this classified or this controlled unclassified information, you will need this level. There's about 20 other mitigation threats that you need to show you're practicing outside of NIST 800. It also involves the DFARS clause. If you have it in your contract already, the DFARS clause in your contract, you're going to have to be required to get this level 3. And at this point, they are saying that multi-factor authentication is an absolute must when you're dealing with these.
Yeah, and really, MFA, multi-factor authentication, that ought to be a must no matter what. Even if you're not doing CMMC, do some MFA.
Yes, it helps tremendously. The bad guys are getting around it in some ways, but really it's putting a squash to a lot of what the criminal behavior we're seeing out there. So once you get into level 4, the proactive, this is where an organization needs to review and measure their practices for effectiveness. At this point, the organization should have the capabilities to adapt their protection, tactics, techniques, and procedures to defend against what they're calling advanced persistent threats, or APTs. And or maybe Brad could come on. Can you give us a little, I guess, of an example or better definition of what an APT would be, advanced persistent threat?
APTs are usually related to nation states, so other national governments, where they basically have endless resources. And so you could think of China, Russia, and they all have fun names like Cozy Bear and things of that nature, just to make it sound a little bit funner to talk about. So,
All right. Yeah, so
Yeah,
those are those big time. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
yeah, no, they're very they're much more complex. Those are real attacks. Those are they're patient, and you know, if you look at the name advanced persistent threat, it is advanced. At this point, you're generally being targeted. It is persistent, meaning you can take those mitigation actions. You can do things to get rid of it. It's going to persist. You know, rebooting the server is not going to get rid of it. It is very persistent. So, you know, listen to those words closely.
Yeah. And so at this point, really, they're asking you to prove that you can adapt what you have in place to go ahead and meet those threats, to defend against those threats, or at least have the plans in place. You know, a lot of this could be theoretical because maybe the threat doesn't happen, but if it does, how do you handle it? How do you adapt? What techniques are you going to use? And so at level 4, they're pushing, you're dealing with some very sensitive data at level 4. And then when you get into level 5, the advanced progressive level, this is where your cybersecurity program has to demonstrate the ability to optimize its capabilities to repel all of these APTs that are coming at you. This is where it's expected that you can ensure the process implementation has been standardized across the entire organization. So no matter how big your organization is, at the receptionist level, they do everything this way. They have these protections in place all the way up to the CEO. And I think some of the CEOs are some of the more relaxed on how they do their security practices. So from the bottom all the way to the top, or you know, you can just think of all of the different ways that your organization has cybersecurity in place. It needs to be out to them. And I'm sure that at this point, it's including their supply chain as well. So they're going to have to show that their supply chain is practicing good cyber hygiene.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
I think if you're familiar with the SOC 2 audits that have been done for years and years, you know, if someone listening is familiar with those, there was a type 1 audit and a type 2 audit. And the type 1 audit is more like your levels 1 through 3 of CMMC, where you have to show that basically you can do it and you have the things in place to do it. Type 2 is proving that you're actually doing it, where you go back, you have to provide 6 months to a year's worth of logs showing that all of these things happen. And that's what you're seeing really with level 4 is now, you know, are you measuring it let's look at the measurements. And then as you get into level 5, like you said, it goes across the organization at that point. In the other levels, maybe you can get away with having a division that does this part, and you protect, you put all of those protections on that division. Whereas once you get into level 5, that's no longer an option. It is required across the board.
And this picture here, this does do a pretty good job of highlighting some of the major parts of each level. And so you can take a look at this, you know, and as you move through, it's just gonna, they're gonna be, each stage is gonna have to develop your cyber security more and more. And that's what we're seeing, is that a lot of these companies, they probably have a cybersecurity, maybe they have a cybersecurity company that takes care of a lot of these domains, but they were maybe a little more relaxed on some of the others. And so what the CMMC is doing is it's making sure you're gonna have to hit everything they lay out. I actually wanted to go ahead and show this. Am I showing my screen, or am I showing just the picture?
You're showing your screen.
So here's a little breakdown of some of the domains and things that you need to hit. This is super detailed. So as you can see here, for the awareness and training side, you need to hit these 2.9s through 2.7s of establish a policy that includes awareness and technology, document the CMMC practices. This is basically a checklist of all the things you're going to need to provide depending on which level you're at. Now, this is an overall view of everything 1 through 5. So, you know, depending on the level, you're not going to need to hit every single one of these, but they broke it down, and there's so many entities here. Physical protection, you need to be able to prove that you're escorting visitors in and out and monitoring who comes in, where they come in, what time they come in. Maintain those audit logs. You need to control and manage physical accesses and device. So it keeps going and going and going. And this is where a lot of businesses today are getting very overwhelmed with how and just like the amount of information they need to do.
Yeah, you know, when you look at that and kind of immediately you feel overwhelmed. Oh my goodness. I mean, you're up to 247 now, still going, still going. So yeah, you know, okay, we've reached the end, 260 something, right? That, how in the world am I going to do all of this? Well, number one, not every single one applies to every level of maturity. But number two, and Brad put it this way to me in a conversation we were having one time, they're giving you the answers to the test. You're being given a test, but they're giving you the answers. Here they are. So they lay it out. Here's what you have to do. So yeah, it's a lot of work, but man, the answers are there.
Yeah, when I first saw this document, it haunted me. I was just like, well, I would actually not like to be the person who had to make this document. I'm sure there were multiple people checking all behind them, but like you had said, I guess stemming from Brad's knowledge that he shared with you before, it gives you the blueprint. It tells you what you need. It's gonna go ahead and lay everything out that you're going to need. They're all different from what level you want to get, what maturity you want to get, but at least you know what you have to hit without just going into it kind of blindly. And like I said, a lot of these that you see are going to be repeated from the NIST guidelines, from the DFARS guidelines. So they took a lot of that information, and now they're going to be requiring it. They're going to be auditing it. You are going to have to prove your maturity level, not by just what what level of book you can read, but actually by what steps you're putting in place and how you're putting those in place.
Yeah, every single one of those controls that you listed there, they have a reference back to NIST DFARS. You know, again, nothing new here.
Nothing new, but if you haven't dealt with this before, it's really good to have some help. So internally, you can do it. You can always go out. This knowledge is out there on the web. Actually, I'll share this one more time just to look at the different levels. And so what's required. So you can see here what David was talking about, the reference. You can actually see back to where it goes. And this one here is from the NIST 3.1.1. Kind of lists which levels need to be accounted for on that task. And you can start checking them off as you go.
Yeah, and I do want to give credit where credit's due. I'm pretty sure that spreadsheet that you have there was the one created by the CMMC Center of Awesomeness. Love the name. That's CMMC-COA.com. I'll post it here in Facebook. They are a great reference. They've been breaking this down for a while. I have spent a lot of time on that site. Certainly need to give them the credit that they deserve.
Awesome. Always cite your resources. There you go. Very important. So, well, I guess
I'm sure they're probably watching right now, and they're like, "Hey, that's ours."
They probably are. I think Brad's on the board for them. So, but yeah. So we showed you. This topic was a tough one for me to approach, just because there's so much to it. We want to be informative. We don't want to be over technical. We don't want to be over inundating you with knowledge or with information. But the matter of the fact is like, if you work with the government, you're going to have to do one of these levels, and you have 7 months to accomplish it. It's really time to start putting these in place.
Yeah, and I'll say just a word of warning out there. There are charlatans already out there, and they come in. They say, you know, they're an expert in CMMC, that they you know, that they've got it ready to go. It's all done. We can tell you exactly what to do. If someone comes in with that attitude, if you go out looking for help and they come in with that attitude, look very closely, because people can be well versed in what we know about CMMC right now. There's not been the first audit actually done, so no one knows for sure. So you know, be careful. I've heard reports of there being service providers out there that are saying, you know, they can pass any audit. Well, how do you know? Whole documentation isn't complete yet. So how do you know?
Brad, I saw you on mute.
Yeah, I think that what David was getting at was this very important distinction. So when you look at DFARS, which is a regulation, which means it's law, CMMC is not. It is actually, the way they're doing it is going to be third party, like a nonprofit, that is actually going to be doing the accreditation of the auditors. And so they're the body that will come together, decide how the actual, you know, where some of these little minute details come into play of how the auditors look at it. You know, is this being logged right? Well, that's kind of up in the air. That's for the accreditation body to kind of decide and agree upon. And so the DoD is kind of handing that off, which is a little different than what you normally see, and it's added some nuance to it. But what it eventually will do is it'll be a completely third party certification. So whether you do DoD work or not, you could actually get this certification. It's not something that is only DoD, because eventually it's probably going to trickle down a little bit further than just the DoD.
Yeah, looking at the future, and Jim, I don't know if you had anything else to add about what we see right now, but looking at the future of CMMC, certainly the federal government is already talking about adopting this for their contractors. If you're a smaller company wanting to work with any major corporation or any government, whether it be state, local, federal, any of them at any level, I would suggest going through the process and getting this done, because it is at least a piece of marketing that you can put up there and say, when you're going out for a proposal and you've got 5 different companies that are bidding on this proposal, and you're the only one that actually has the certification. Hey, I've got a level 3 certification. It's been proven. Here it is. Take a look. That's going to give you a leg up in competition. And so I think Brad's point is right on. This is going to expand probably very quickly.
Yes, yes, it will. So start now, and if, like you said, that you could be the shining example out of all the people going for that job. It's already being talked about quite a bit, where this is a level of security that people are attracted to. Companies that are larger, that are worried about this, just think about some of the big breaches that have happened lately. You better believe that they're going to be looking into who is taking care of their cybersecurity at whatever level it is. Remember, we talked about, even if you're just mowing their lawns, you're going to have to protect that information. They don't want their contacts getting out. They don't want any of their unclassified but still very important documents or information getting out there. And so I guess what should businesses do to kind of prepare? I think a very good first step is to determine if they are handling any CUIs, any CUIs right now. That will help you really see what level. So if you're working with a DoD and you need to evaluate what type of information you're getting from them. Like I said, a lot of times the government's gonna tell you, but at the same time, if you're producing stuff that then becomes a CUI, you really have to have prepared that to be in your level 3 certification.
Yeah, CUI gets marked. It gets marked as this is CUI, and so I'd say generally a company knows if they're working with CUI or not. If you're working with CUI and you have not started the CMMC process, understand you need to get going. You need to start looking at it and getting familiar with what's required. We've built a pretty significant stack that fulfills quite a few of these controls, but even the technology company, the technology company can't, they're not in a place to do all of it. You brought up physical security in there. Generally, the tech company is not going to do physical security. Are we putting in locks and logging ingress and egress when people come in and go out? Usually the technology company isn't doing that sort of thing. So start getting familiar with it very quickly and prepare yourself for the changes that are going to be required. One good thing about all of this, and it's always been this way, but now that companies know they're going to be spending money on this, it is an expense that can be I forget the proper word for it. Brad can probably jump in here, but it's an expense that is allowed. Is that the right word?
An allowable cost.
Yeah, an allowable cost in the contract. So you can include the cost of implementing all of this in the contract.
Yeah, and another good step is just to do a cyber hygiene, you know, um, survey of your company and just see where you're at. If a lot of this is handled by your IT company, just approach them. You can just even approach them with these 17 domains that I have up and just touch on each one and start to get prepared, see what you have in place. I know that was one of the tougher things with some of the businesses we've worked with is they know where they need to be, but they're not sure where their stance is right now. They're not sure exactly how they're handling each of these domains. And so that's a great start is take these 17, look at what you're doing, what you have in place, work with your technology people to make sure you understand if and how they're doing each of these. It doesn't have to be super technical. It just has to be, are we doing it? What do you could ask them things like, well, what type of programs do you have in place for this? Or what's your incident response to if this happens? And that gets you into a good position to at least know where you're standing, know how far you've got to go to advance.
So I think the best place to start, and I found myself in this position a year, I don't even know how long ago it was. So I'm speaking from experience. Is you first need to start out, if you're a DoD contractor currently, is to find out if it's in your contracts. So the CMMC language is not going to be, but you need to find out, are you currently obligated to comply with the DFAR 7012, which is what has all the NIST 800, which is what the CMMC is kind of based on. If it's there, you need to act like yesterday because you are contractually bound to be compliant or at least supply certain information. And so if it's there and if you've never done one, you should start with a gap assessment. So basically that's saying, here is what I have to comply with, and then where do I meet it and where do I not? And then from there, you can take that assessment and create what I mentioned earlier was a POAM, which is a plan of action and milestones, which is just, hey, what are we going to do when? And kind of develop, how we move forward. And because if that's in your contract, you're supposed to have that anyway. So that gives you what you are supposed to have for the contract, but then also sets you up to move forward in your plan.
Yeah.
It's a great approach. Thank you, Brad.
We are lucky. Brad, so you said about a year ago, so you've been working for helping your company establish a lot of this. What level are you guys looking at?
So we currently do have contracts that we have to be, we have the DFAR 7012. So based on those contracts, we are not fully there, but that's currently allowed. And so we are I always tell people we're about 2.5 maybe, which is significant. That extra half is pretty hard to accomplish. But we do have contracts where we have CUI. And so that, currently we have to hit the current standard.
Yeah, that's great. And that, like we talked about, that level 2 really is that transitioning point. It's where you're going to make some pretty big changes and implement some pretty big milestones there. And so that step 2 does typically take a little bit longer to accomplish all those requirements to get to number 3.
And I think the part that, again, this is all stuff I deal with every day. So I'm trying to make sure I don't use acronyms without explaining them because the government loves acronyms.
Yeah.
And the thing that I think is, if you're a small company and you're like, hey, we're just a subcontractor, well, that's going to apply to you. If eventually the client is the DoD, you will have to have a certification if you plan to still be a subcontractor. And that's considered a contract flow down. And so if your prime contractor has, where they have to have CMMC level 3, they determine if they're going to be handing off this information to you. If they are going to be handing off this information, the CUI, the subcontractor has to also be level 3. And if let's just say, for instance, it's a construction project, and you are, just a simple, you're just moving dirt. It may sound like, well, I'm not going to be touching CUI, or, why do I have to have this? I'm just literally moving dirt. The DoD doesn't care. If you are a sub on that contract, you have to at least have a level 1. And so it's going to impact anyone, subcontractor, contractors that work with the DoD.
Yeah, and the level 1, that's a great thing to bring up there, Brad. The level 1 certification, it's really not too terribly bad. You'll be able to put the basic things in place to reach that certification. What did we call it? Basic cyber hygiene. Okay, so you can get there. What I think is going to affect a lot of companies, if you're moving dirt, you're only ever going to move dirt. You're not planning on ever doing anything other than moving dirt. You get that level 1, maybe you're okay. If you're a company that has any desire to grow, to get deeper in, to get maybe some of the bigger contracts, go ahead and start looking at moving up level 2, level 3, because you don't want to miss out on an opportunity because you didn't go ahead and get up to level 3.
Yeah, and the good example of this is I think about the Target breach. And so Target had a huge breach, millions of dollars, millions of customers were affected, and how they got in was through the HVAC company. So, all I'm doing is coming in and recharging their AC with some, some Freon or however they do it. That's all I'm doing is I don't need this certification, but it's been proven, it's happened over and over and
Yeah,
over.
it seems like we're always talking about these supply chain attacks.
Yeah. So that's where, I just do this. I don't do a whole lot. Well, unfortunately, you are still part of the big picture there, and you're going to have to clean things up a little bit, get some cybersecurity in place. So I don't know if we had any other questions out there, any other big aspects that I've missed along the way. You guys want to?
I don't see any additional questions. We do see Bridget and Don are taking notes over there, so that's good. We appreciate you guys doing that, and yeah, that's all I see at the moment.
All right. Well, thank you again to everybody out there who joined us. We do appreciate the support. At Chill with Jim, we are trying to just bring awareness and help everybody along. So if you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. You can check us out on Facebook. We're on LinkedIn. The episodes will be on Facebook and YouTube. Like us, friend us, all that cool stuff that they do, the cool kids do. And please help us support this cause. Brad, thank you again. Brad was a special guest last week, and I would almost consider him a special guest today as well, with the amount of experience he brought to the table here. So thank you. And Dave, don't wait for the response. I get excited sometimes. So David, what do we have on the docket?
Yeah, well, next week, I don't know how many of you guys have HBO Max. They're not paying us to say this, but recently, or I don't know if it's out yet, but the King Kong versus Godzilla movie is coming out. And that's what we're going to be talking about next week, kind of. I mean, not exactly, but kind of. We're going to be talking about Zoom versus Teams. right? COVID hit, everybody jumped on Zoom. That's where the meetings are. What about Teams? And if you're paying for Zoom and you're paying for Microsoft 365, do you need them both? Can Teams meetings replace Zoom meetings? We're going to be looking at that a little bit next week.
Yes, it is going to be a head-to-head battle. So join us to see who comes out on top. You're going to go over some of the pros and cons in each, but yeah, Microsoft Teams has come a long way. And so we'll be examining both of those. And remember, it's always going to be the same chill time at the same chill network. And thank you again for joining us. We will see you next week.